Ultimate Spider-Man returns. Indeed, the whole Ultimate Universe. Sorta. Marvel Comics has revived the Ultimate Universe in a new form. It's a reboot with heavy ties to the end of the original Ultimate Universe. And it's bringing the world a Married to Mary Jane with 2 kids, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, providing an alternate universe haven, potentially, for something many fans have lamented, and that is the dissolution of the marriage of Peter and MJ. And just in general, what seems to be a reluctance to let Peter move forward in any aspect of his life at all. But before we look at this new Ultimate Spider-Man and see how it fares, a brief explanation of how we got here in the first place. Starting with just what was the original Ultimate Universe. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's go back. Earth 1610, the designated number for the Ultimate Universe, was launched in the real world in the year 2000. It was a bit to increase sales and readership, and ditch what some felt was a barrier to entry, which was the long history/continuity present at Marvel Comics. The Ultimate Universe would take familiar characters and put a bit of a different spin on them, or maybe just place them inside a new circumstance. The idea was developed by Bill Jemas, who stated that Marvel was, and I quote, publishing stories that were all but impossible for teens to read, and unaffordable to boot. I'm sure some of you feel that he could have been making that comment about today, time of recording. He wanted to reboot the characters entirely, but then editor-in-chief Joe Quesada decided on another imprint instead. For Spider-Man, this meant his ultimate self would be a teenager, once more giving access to what some felt would be more relatable stories for a younger audience. While mainverse Peter could go on doing as he was doing. We're cliff noting this. The Ultimate Universe had a fascinating history, with various creators coming and going, shifts in tone, some real highs and some real lows. Not to mention by the end of it, a whole host of its own continuity to contend with. As for the Ultimate Spider-Man comic, it ran from 2000 to 2011 and contained 160 issues, with a brief break between 133 and 134. Which is counted as a Volume 1 and Volume 2. It was written for the entirety of its run by Brian Michael Bendis, and the art for the vast majority of the Peter Parker run was by Mark Bagley. The initial 160 issues focused on Peter Parker's time as Spider-Man, eventually leading up to his death. After his in-universe death, the mantle would be taken up by Miles Morales, who would get a series entitled Ultimate Comics Spider-Man, which ran from 2011 to 2013. The universe itself would end up being destroyed in 2015, in the Secret Wars event, which took its name from the 1980s event of the same name. And it does borrow some of the story beats from that. The 2015 Secret Wars event was written by Jonathan Hickman, who was also the author of Marvel Contract to do the reintroduction in 2023. So the premise was extreme cliff notes. The end of the 616, 1610, and the multiverse in general as the 616 and 1610 smush into each other. A big collision, or as it's phrased in the comics, a dimensional incursion. And both are eradicated, and in their place rise Battle World, which is a result of Doctor Doom saving the universe and setting himself up as God Emperor. Mr. Fantastic, Namor, and Black Panther, so a lot of the Illuminati, they end up defeating Doom. And Black Panther uses the reality gem to restore the universe. Only there were some changes. Namely, whatever they wanted to keep from the Ultimate Universe, so mostly Miles Morales and his family, and a couple of other things, they got to stay in the Prime Universe. The series ended with the vague promise that they would restore the multiverse one universe at a time. So it was pretty open-ended, gone for all intents and purposes, but with a get out of jail in case we need it for sales/stories later card. A key component in it returning would be one of the characters who got to phase into the main universe. And that was the Maker, the evil version of Reed Richards from the Ultimate Universe. I know some of you are saying, what's the difference? Only I'm saying that. I love hate Reed. That is to say, I love how complex Reed is. Give me complicated, slightly problematic Reed all day over nice guy Reed. But I digress. For a while, the Maker floated around the Marvel Universe on the periphery, tried out when necessary for a le gasp reveal. But this relaunch of the Ultimate Universe put him to work, showcasing him having a master plan of trying to create a new world for himself. Not remake Earth 1610, instead messing with Earth 6160. Doesn't roll off the tongue the same way. He did this by attempting to manipulate and alter core events to create an environment conducive to his supremacy. Changing things like making sure that Loki was on the throne of Asgard and destroying the Bifrost. Changing the timing of the Fantastic Four's trip so that they don't go through that storm and they don't end up getting powers. Stopping a certain spider from biting Peter Parker. He can't change everything, but it's enough to put a dent on the development of superheroes in that universe. He also allies with specific people, like Howard Stark. The lead up to the new Ultimate Solo Comics was called Ultimate Invasion. It was 4 issues. And then there was a one-shot called Ultimate Universe #1. And they're worth checking out. They set up a new status quo for this Ultimate Universe going forward. But it's also not necessary to have looked at them for Ultimate Spider-Man #1 to make sense. In fact, some of the details that appear within may make you curious and want to go check out what happened before. If only there was some kind of magical system. A little bit of words or text that one could put on the bottom of the page, perhaps from the editor. It'd be revolutionary. I know, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Forever salty about non-accurate editor's notes or just ignoring them altogether. With all that groundwork laid out, we've arrived at Ultimate Spider-Man #1 2024. Some light spoilers, even though we're not going to go through it point by point, but we're going to do a pretty big overview. So if you haven't read it because it recently came out time of recording, well, now's your chance. Dip out now and check it out for yourself. For those who want to remain, let's do it. How is it? It's a solid start. In terms of setup, it feels similar to the MC2, which was an imprint that featured secret stories that were supposedly taking place in Marvel's future and alternate universe. The whole concept sprung out of a what if. It surrounded his daughter becoming Spider-Man, Mayday Parker. So there's a bit of a vibe of that in that it feels kind of like jumping into the future because Peter is married, has kids, is settled. It's not. It's just that mainverse Spidey doesn't feel like he's moved or matured. Not that you need a family to mature, but Peter hasn't moved pretty much at all. He just keeps getting reset like a record skipping. So by contrast to that, this Peter feels more mature, which already starts the series off with a different energy. Now the cover is very reminiscent of the first Ultimate Universe covers, very simple. Marco Cicchetto's art is smooth and nice, but not overly exciting. It's very poster pinup, though some people may appreciate the homage and enjoy that kind of hanging on your wall style look. However, if you're not vibing with it, there are a lot of variants one could choose from. I of course like the family one, or this one where it looks like he's gonna get into a fight, which doesn't happen. That's the Silver Age Lies cover. Ultimate Spider-Man #1 was written by Jonathan Hickman, with art by Marco Cicchetto. Colors Matt Wilson. Our Peter in this story is 35. He's approaching not a midlife crisis, but that slow realization that his life is what it is. There's no waiting for it to start, it's been going. And he's starting to feel like it's been passing him by, like he was meant for more than what is happening inside of it. But what? There's a bit of a restlessness there. A dissatisfaction, even though from the outside there's really nothing to be dissatisfied with. But he's been presented with something that could change his life's direction. The reader won't be privy to what that is until the end of the issue, although the item that gave him that option is shown from the start of the issue. What we're given is a day in the life of this Peter Parker. His relationship with his kids, Richard and May, his wife, Mary Jane, and his job. He still works at the Daily Bugle. There are lots of threads that remain the same, which creates this grounding feeling that a lot of Peter Parker had to do with his core being and not necessarily with him being Spider-Man. That was part of it, but that there were lots of core Peter elements. We see that Peter is an attentive father, although he does tend to have a bit of a hard time balancing his various emotional obligations to people, meaning he's off late or staying longer places because he feels like people need him, and so MJ picks up some of that slack. It's a nice little nod to that lack of life balance that mainstream Spider-Man has. By having it showcased this way in this issue, it's acknowledging that that wasn't purely because of his superhero lifestyle. That's a trait that just comes straight from Peter. In this comic, Peter has a solid and well-worn loving relationship with MJ. It's supportive and they come together, but they also have their own separate tasks. They literally plan out time to talk. It's so mature. It's a rarity in comics time of recording, like a unicorn. It's a marriage written with the acknowledgement that it doesn't end your life or necessarily cut you off from all adventures or make you unrelatable. It just takes the time and care to write both people and acknowledge that there is some give and take on both sides. There's a bit more focus of her giving it to him, but that's because this issue is about his issues. That could flip, or it could be a source of conflict, but a nicely, subtly introduced one. It's clear from their conversations that Peter and MJ know each other quite well. MJ is aware of Peter's feelings of restlessness and that he wishes he was doing more in his life. She's supportive of him trying to figure out what that is, but that doesn't mean it couldn't upset the balance of what they have, and she won't let that happen. Do you know what you have to do? I think so, yes. Are things gonna change between us? Never. Go get him, Tiger. Both support and potential conflict baked right in, all inside the same conversation. What a good exchange. Plus it creates a new dynamic for him going into being Spider-Man with support. Though it is left a tad vague or coy, so that she could not know if that is what the desired course is, but hopefully it is as it seems and she's in the know. But even so, he doesn't know what being Spider-Man will fully entail, and there is still that tension with his family because he's still gonna have to balance things, he's still gonna have to keep them safe. Now something that is subtly but well foreshadowed is that Uncle Ben is alive. This is done by having his son be called Richard, because it's an unstated rule that his son in an alternate universe is called Ben after his uncle. So if he's not, that must mean that his uncle's alive. His son here is named after his father. Uncle Ben is a managing editor at the Daily Bugle, where Peter works, so he still very much has a mentorship role in Peter's life. As does Jameson, who is a friendly, toned-down Jameson, potentially tempered through both his friendship with Ben and a lack of that wall-crawling menace Spider-Man. Him and Peter have a great relationship, so it'll be interesting to see how that holds up once Peter becomes Spider-Man. Now Ben is very much working at the paper for narrative purposes. He needs to be there for some of the conflict to occur, but it works out because mostly what Uncle Ben does is die in most stories. While there are some details about his pre-death career, they're not numerous, and so liberties taken on that front feel a bit less egregious, though mileage may vary. Sorry, I started laughing because you remember that meme when they used to have Uncle Ben on the Uncle Ben's rice and it's Spider-Man crying. I think about that sometimes. Peter is pretty passive throughout most of this first issue, with events happening around him, his obligations moving him from location to location. He accompanies Ben to the memorial to the attack from Ultimate Invasion in the one-shot, which sets up Iron Lad Tony Stark as a villain to the people. They don't know that he's actually on their side. Aunt May died in that attack, as did Norman Osborn, which has left Harry quite embittered, and he gives a very uncomfortable speech at this event. One of the fun aspects of this issue is seeing all the little changes that have been made. Spider-Man's main universe story has been been well established across comics, across adaptations, so that even for one who isn't a regular reader, most of the changes and what they could mean are identifiable. Probably the weakest part of the issue is the Uncle Ben and Jameson quit the Bugle because of Fisk's interference with the board. He's encroaching, he's overreaching. Bad Kingpin. But that's a mileage varies thing. It depends how much one can suspend their disbelief surrounding the depiction of newspapers and reporting, which feels a bit out of date and romanticized, closer to the idealized version of the profession, rather than the highly corporatized, polarized, divided, and moving at light speed into the digital sphere reality. However, from a narrative perspective, if belief can be suspended, it works. It sets up conflicts not just between Fisk and Jameson/Ben, but also between Ben and Jameson, since it's revealed they have different ideas about reporting, which makes sense given how Jameson usually is in the main universe. We're setting up seeds that maybe he could go that way again. The sensationalism. Peter admires his mentor's ability to just take such a huge life risk, and he confides in Ben that he feels that he's just drifting through life. Ben at first assumes realistically that something's wrong with his marriage, but Peter says it's not that, but doesn't really tell him what it is. Just vagaries. This Peter has never found himself in a position to take a big risk or been forced to, since he was never bitten. And while he has responsibilities, they're average. They're not great yet. He still has to learn that lesson. The difference is he wants that responsibility. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the dynamic and what will happen to make him learn that all-important Spidey lesson.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
It turns out that Peter had been contacted by Tony Stark, Iron Lad, who in this reality set an undoing what the Maker did by giving people who were meant to have powers their powers, if possible. So it is that he presents Peter with the spider that should have bitten him, and a costume. This message matches with the feelings Peter has been experiencing about being meant for more, and it remains to be seen whether the opportunity to do so ends up a positive or a negative. I'm repeating this with others like you, and in 6 months, if I've done this correctly, I will exit this room and find an Earth that has regained its heroes, and together we will free the world. It is my greatest hope that you are among our number. You were supposed to have a different life, Peter Parker. You were supposed to protect the innocent, save lives, and inspire the citizens of this world to be their best selves. And instead, all of that was taken from you. There's also a lot one could read into that and whether it's true or not, but we'll put that aside for now. Peter has a good life, but as mentioned, he feels like he's floating through it. So it is that he decides through the encouragement of those around him, some knowing his intentions, others not, to take a leap and become Spider-Man. Becoming Spider-Man is his first true act of agency in this issue. There are a lot of things coming together here. He got his costume from Tony, which was very MCU, although this Tony Stark is younger, so the dynamic is a bit different there. The whole story has got MC2 family vibes, but he's just starting out rather than having retired due to injury. All the elements presented here have some degrees of familiarity, but they've been shifted around. Ever so slightly, but those light shifts have produced big results. It makes for an entertaining and intriguing what-if scenario. The best kind of what-if, the one that has potential to continue on, which is what one needs if they're trying to create a larger alternate universe. One that could potentially be longer lived. Fingers crossed, we'll see. There's a lot happening behind the scenes in all kinds of places. But in a fantasy realm, it would be nice to see another long-running series that gets up to 125 or something like that. As it stands, there are lots of fun questions to ponder that the story itself has started to bring up. Like, what difference will it make having Ben influence Peter throughout his life rather than dying in his transition from teenager to young man? This was a solid issue. You learn a lot about Peter, his headspace, his world, his relationships with other characters. There are lots of nice little world-building details and characters featured in the issue. You also get the additional enjoyment if you're familiar with the main status quo of comparing and contrasting. Spider-Man's core values and theme hold up. They work with the changes in this issue and not against them. However, while it's well constructed and thought out, it may not be the type of comic for everybody. For some, all of those references mentioned may feel too derivative, and they may not feel that anything new is being added. The new combination may not interest them. Another factor, this issue had pretty much no action. The Green Goblin attacks at one point, and that's it. The rest of the issue is all talking, exposition, and world building. And for some, that will be too slow, boring. If this is only to be a miniseries, the one has to get more across. So for some, the balance may be off. And even if one isn't familiar with all the sources they're being pulled from, they still may not appreciate the retread. Peter with a family, been there, done that. Some may find the presentation of MJ and Peter too idyllic, though I maintain there are hints as to how that could crack, realistic cracks too. But I can see some finding it heavily romanticized and boring. Side note, who else misses Harry's waves? Ultimate Harry didn't have them, so this is accurate. But for me, they're always missed. They're iconic. And that was Ultimate Spider-Man, #1, 2024. A well thought out and intriguing start to the new Ultimate Universe. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Did you like it? Did it feel like Spider-Man? Was it what you were hoping for when you heard new Ultimate Universe? Did you not like it? Was it it boring? Do you not feel it aligned with the core of Spider-Man? You know I want to hear it all. Tell me things and put them down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.